All right, 2 tomato plants, same age, same variety there. So planted by the same people, came out of the same greenhouses. What's the difference here? Well, one got potted up, this one didn't. One got potted up to a bigger pot area here. Now they both have little tomatoes on them. This is a cherry type tomato. But here's what happens. This one is root bound. Okay, so this one is under a lot of stress. Now we're going to plant these, weather permitting, and this will give us some tomatoes, but obviously we would be better off if we had plants that had no stress, that were just growing full speed ahead like this. Okay, let me put this down. We're going to do several things today. One is that we're going to brix some food. So we've got some tomatoes here, and we're going to use a little brix meter. I'm going to have to ask for volunteers on a number of different places here today. Now, when we do this, when we do these workshops, we have to talk to each other, especially when we're outside in the garden there. So I'd like to give a signal. In here we have the mic. Out there we won't have a mic. And you already know that my voice is rather soft. So when we're out there and I need your attention, we're going to be working with each other. We're going to be talking to each other. We're going to have to. So here's the signal. If I put my hands up like this, if you'll do the same thing, okay? That's just a signal that I want your attention. I want to show you something that is important to people. So pretty quick, even people who have their backs to me will see your hands go up, and they'll know that that's the signal that, that I need your attention, and I need some quiet for that. Okay. We have just some incredible promises that God gives to us. And let's go to this one. You probably can. All right. I'll have to learn to move slowly. Let's go to this one. You can probably quote this one with me. Let's go to James 1, and let's go to 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, without blaming us, and it will be given him. Then going over to verse 17, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. We have such a great promise that God will give us wisdom, and so let's ask him for that right now. Father in heaven, you do such great things for us, and you have promised to teach us things we could not possibly know, and you have promised to give us wisdom if we'll ask for it. And so we're asking for it today. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, let's go to this color handout first, and let's just look at the first page here. Back in 1950, my grandfather could eat one apple, and you can see the amount of iron that he got out of it, 4.3 milligrams of iron from one apple. 48 years later, if I came along and ate an apple, I only get 0.18 milligrams of iron out of the same apple. That means that I have to eat 26 apples compared to what my grandfather got from one apple. Now, that's an impossibility. I can't eat 26 apples when he ate one. This just shows the tremendous decrease in minerals that we have in our food supply. Now this is just iron, and of course there's similar things happening in a lot of other minerals there, particularly in the trace minerals. And it's the trace minerals that give us the strength and the immunity, the health into your body. And it's the trace minerals that give the immunity to your plants, to make your plants healthy there. Let's go to the next chart here. And okay, so we're covering about 100 years here. Goes clear back to 1900 and then up to the present here. And you can see, as minerals go down, you can see that we have an increase in disease. You'll see a tremendous increase in disease. In humans and in animals and in plants, we have this tremendous increase in disease. Now, look, as the minerals go down, look at the curve as these diseases go up. Just an explosion, just an absolute explosion of these diseases here. This is from Dr. Mercola, and I'll put this up on my website later. I have not, this is difficult to read. It's the best I could do copying it off the internet. And anyway, we'll put this up and you'll be able to read it more clearly. But here's cancer. You can see how that's going up like, yes, diabetes, obesity, heart trouble, all of these diseases just going up like that. Now, the blue part here goes back to about the 1930s, and that's mechanized farming, when mechanized farming first came in. And then there's kind of a purple box in here. That's when the ammonia nitrate fertilizers first started to be used. And they are used more and more. By pouring on the nitrogens, we can get plants to grow very big and very fast there. And but the nitrogens, especially this ammonia nitrate, ties up, or it causes a deficiency. In other words, we get too much of the nitrogen and it crowds out some of the other minerals that we need in the plant and in your garden. So anyway, here's the purple part there. Now we come into pesticide, herbicide, and fungicide, and this is the pink box here, and that started in about 1960 in earnest and continues through today. Matter of fact, it's increasing all the time, these chemicals that we put on our farms and on our food. Now, let's go over to about 2000 or maybe mid-1990s, when GMOs, first genetically modified foods, first became introduced to our farms. Now, the genetically modified foods, the genetically modified plants are modified in a couple of different ways. But one of the primary ways that plants are genetically modified is so that they will not take up certain minerals into the plant. Now, if the plant is not taking up these minerals, it's deficient to begin with. So it's not good for food to begin with. But because it's not taking up those minerals, the plant is weaker. The immune system of that plant is much weaker there. So that means we have to spray that field with fungicides and pesticides of all kinds, and we're putting out lots of poisons there because we've got to keep that crop alive until the farmer can harvest it and get it to market. So not only are we getting food which does not have the minerals we need, but we're getting all of these poisons, all of these toxins into our bodies there. Now you can see that as that happens, we get a tremendous explosion of disease there. Yes?
Questions now or later?
Yeah.
Just to remind everyone that there's a question box there. If you have any questions, you can add it to that question box. We're going to
Thank you. Okay, so what do we do about it? So we see the problem, and we see all of these diseases, things that we never heard of before. All kinds of diseases. At my house, or the campus where I live, there's a young lady who has what's called leaky gut. Thank you. There's something called leaky gut. We never heard of such things a few years ago. That poor lady suffers with all kinds of problems there. It was caused by these toxins and by the genetically modified foods that she was getting in her diet there. There's another way that plants are genetically modified, and that is that they put into the plant the pesticide. They put into the plant the pesticide. They splice that right in. So there's something called BT, which you can buy in the nursery, and it is a disease that only affects worms. I'm talking about worms that come from caterpillars or moths there. So these are, it doesn't affect your animals, it doesn't affect humans, and so we spread that on the garden, and it kills the worms, so that we have food that is not full of wormholes in it and full of worms there. Now, when that same BT is now spliced into the plant, now the insect comes along and he eats the plant. That worm comes along and eats the plant, and it dies because it's got the BT in the plant itself there. There's only one problem with that. When we eat that food, we become manufacturers of that BT in our own body, and we get things like leaky gut and other serious problems there. That's very difficult to get rid of. People with that just really suffer a lot. This poor girl that I was telling you about has spent thousands and thousands of dollars that she really doesn't have with doctors and special programs and whatever to try to gain her health. And she's just in her early 30s there, yeah. So anyway, if there's any genetically modified food, do whatever you can to eliminate it, not to eat it there. Now, when I go to the grocery store, I'm not allowed to know, because of the laws of the land, I'm not allowed to know whether I'm buying a genetically modified product or not there. So the way to avoid that, is to buy organic or grow your own there and read the labels so that you're not getting these toxins into your body there. Okay. Okay, last night we were talking about the ocean water and the Hybrix food and whatever, results of it. Let's see, we saw that. The ocean water method is very important to dilute the ocean water, 10 parts of fresh water to 1 part of ocean water. Now, we talked about the ocean having all of these 92 different minerals in a perfect balance there. And then ocean water and human blood are identical. They match. When we analyze the ocean water and we analyze human blood, they match there. There are 3 differences. The first is that we have a lot of iron in our blood, and there's almost no iron in the ocean water. So our blood is red and the ocean water is clear. Second difference is that phosphate does a similar thing. It drops to the bottom of the ocean, and so there's not enough phosphate in ocean water to grow good plants, land plants. there. I've tried it, it doesn't work. The third difference is that all life on Earth is electrical, including our plants. When we plant a tree out here Sunday, you'll see we pay particular attention to that electrical magnetic field and the electric currents that go through the earth there. So in the ocean, we have all of these mineral salts so that the electricity can freely flow through the ocean. But on land, it is nitrogen that brings that electric current into the plant. So you've got to pay attention to those three things. I do believe you could go anywhere on Earth, any third world country, if you could get ocean water and take care of those three things, that you would be able to grow a very healing, healthy crop there. Okay. Do not drink the ocean water. Let the plant take up the nutrients and eat the plant. Now, in the ocean, the water is, or the minerals are in a crystalline chemical form. No animal can use those directly, not even an insect there. So don't drink the ocean water directly. It's actually toxic to us. Let the plant take it up through the roots, and then in the leaf of the plant, which is the factory for that plant, the leaf will take carbon from carbon dioxide in the air and combine it with those crystalline chemicals. And now those same crystalline chemicals become an organic food which your body can use very readily there. And it'd be almost impossible to overdose on those particular minerals or nutrients. I want to give you an example just so that you understand this a little easier. Let's take salt, and I'm reviewing here a little bit. But if I cut my finger, the blood is salty. If I get a tear or a drop of sweat into my mouth, it's very salty. We have lots of salt in our bodies. It's absolutely necessary for life. We die quickly without that salt balance. But if I take as little as 5 little teaspoons of salt at one time, that's a lethal dose. So what's necessary in balance, out of balance, becomes toxic and lethal. So balance is the key that we have here. And then further taking those minerals, including the salt, when it becomes an organic food through the plant, it's very difficult to overdose. As a matter of fact, you won't. In one stick of celery, one single stick of celery, there is more sodium chloride, more salt, than most people shake on their whole meal, just in one stick of celery. Now, we've all heard of people who are on a salt restricted diet, maybe because of heart trouble, maybe because a woman is pregnant or some other thing there. And yet you will never hear a doctor say you're on a celery restricted diet, because you cannot overdose. That would not be toxic to you. You can have all the sodium chloride through celery and be perfectly safe there. Okay, I do want to go into some other things here. Okay, the soil is so depleted that we do not get the nutrients we need by adding ocean water. You're adding all the nutrients, all the elements in the periodic chart that you studied in high school chemistry class, except the gases, or some of the gases. If you now add nitrogen, phosphate, and iron if you need it, you will have an ideal fertilizer and a perfect blend. Now, we're a long ways from the ocean, but it's inexpensive to get ocean water salts, and we can get it through a product called C90 that you can buy in 50-pound bags, and nobody seems to have it here, but we'll find a source where you can get it here. There. Okay, ocean water is chemically close to human blood, and it's been used in transfusions in extreme conditions. Now, during World War II, double-filtered ocean water was used as a substitute for human blood transfusions. Dr. Calvin Dents, when he was a young man, before he was a Christian, he lied about his age so that he could get into the Navy. Second World War was raging there. So he got into the Navy, even though he wasn't old enough to join. And he told me that on one particular ship out in the ocean, that there was one of the sailors just was too hot and too uncomfortable, and he said, "I'm going swimming." He jumped off and went swimming in the ocean and was attacked very quickly by sharks there. Pretty soon there was blood all around, and with some difficulty the guys on the ship got him back into the ship. He was cut up and badly hurt. He would not have survived because he had lost so much blood. The doctor on board filtered ocean water and used that as a substitute for human blood and saved that man's life. That was done a lot. You can imagine that during the Second World War there was a tremendous need for blood and not enough. And so on hospital ships out in the Pacific Ocean, they double filtered this ocean water and saved many, many lives there. All of these minerals in that right balance seem to do a really good job of healing. Another man that I dealt with a while back was working on a car, and the gas tank exploded, and he was severely burned. He didn't have insurance. He was a single man at the time. He had some ocean water. He poured it in the bathtub and sat in that, covered his body in that as much as he could. He healed much faster than he would have otherwise. They tell me that when men were blown off ships during the war and had bad burns, and there were others who had similar burns but didn't get thrown into the water, blown into the water, that those who were in the water for a while healed faster and better than those who were just on deck there. So there's some very interesting things there that happen there. Okay, let's go to... Okay, results of ocean water. Long shelf life. Food grown this way does not seem to rot. It may dry out, but does not seem to spoil. And I've had a number of experiences that way. I talked about it last night. Okay, an interesting thing is that the Brix reading, we're going to do some Brixing here, but the Brix reading on plants grown with ocean water often does not seem to be significantly higher or any higher than those grown just the regular way. And I'm not sure why that is. In one particular experiment that we did, we had 6 rows. Each row was a different method of gardening. So if I planted tomatoes in one row, I would plant the same tomato plant or the same variety in the same day in each one of the 6 rows, so we had a comparison there. And so we had tomatoes and carrots and squash and all kinds of different things there. And what I noticed, Brixing the ocean water row and comparing it with the others, is that the Brix reading was no higher. It wasn't lower, but it was no higher either, except for sweet corn. And when our sweet corn was about Brix 20, we got maybe a Brix 22 in that ocean water row. So there was a little difference there, but for the most part, there was no difference in the Brix reading there. Okay, healing properties, curative effect. Okay, Ellen White planting method here. All right, I think at this point I want to go to this handout. So take this out and look at it here. Okay, what I want you to turn to is soil analysis report here. This is a soil test that's taken right here, right out here in this garden that we're going to go to this afternoon. And so let's just go through it here. Now, on the left-hand side, you can see we have these different items that are being tested, starting with humus, nitrates, ammonia, we're reading down. And then as we're reading across, it's the unit, which is generally pounds per acre. Desired ratio. Ratios are important with some of these things. Desired level. Now that's where we would like to be. That would be ideal if we could get to that. Lab results, that's what this soil actually tested there. So that's what this soil actually tested, and then on the far right-hand side we have some ratios and comments there. So let's go through this. All right, so let's go to the humus. Now, humus is not just the compost you put in the garden. Humus is when we're testing humus, we're testing the humic acid, which means organic matter when it is totally decomposed. When it's totally decomposed. Should I use a hand mic instead?
Yeah, if that works, then.
Okay.
Where's the switch? Check. This was on. This shouldn't have been on.
Oh.
That might have been on. Try test.
Okay. Tested. Is that better?
That's better.
That's better. Okay.
That's our problem.
All right. Thank you.
Or is it?
Or is it?
No, maybe not. Okay, maybe not.
Okay. Let me just check this out. Okay. Are we on? Okay, good. Okay, so humus is not just the compost, it's totally decomposed organic matter. And often when we need to raise the humic acid in the soil, we go back and mine things that were buried during Noah's flood. And we'll put that into the ground. Your compost will eventually, over time, become humus and show up here. So the desired level is 30 to 40, and in this case we have a level of 40. And I'll tell you that that's far better than the average soil that I test. Yet it needs to be brought up some here. Next is nitrates, and the nitrates are the fertilizers, the nitrogens that make leaves and stems grow. So if we want leaves and stems to grow, we need to get nitrogen fertilizers there. Next is the ammonias. And again, these are nitrogens, but these nitrogens do something different. The ammonia nitrogens make flowers and fruit come. So if you have a plant that is, let's say we have a tomato plant and it's up about this high and it's not putting on much in the way of flowers or fruit, if we change the fertilizer so that we have an ammonia type fertilizer, it'll start putting on flowers right away and start fruiting there. And you can change a plant. It's interesting to see because you can change a plant very, very easily. I'll give you a formula a little later that we use in the garden and on fruit trees and other things there. So again, we need a level of 40 and we've got 10% of that, and that's not bad. I'm not worried about that because that's an easy fix here to change that. Let's see, let's go to the phosphorus next. We need a level of 174 and we have a level of 2. Wow, is that a problem? Yeah, I think Kevin was asking me yesterday what the general thing for this area would be. My guess is that the phosphate would be low in the whole area that way. It usually is low. In most of the United States it's low. And in some places it's very high there. Often when we get into conscientious organic gardeners, we find the most out of balance soil, particularly in phosphorus and potassium. So we could be in a very low phosphate area here, and if somebody has been gardening organically for a number of years and not paying attention to a soil test, that could be way out of balance there. All right, so we'll have to pay attention to that. Potassium. We need a level of 167, and we have a level of 73. That's quite low, and we will not get good produce unless we balance those till we get those up. Let's go to calcium next. We need a level of 3,000, that's 3,000 pounds per acre, and we have 2/3 of that at 2,049. And that's pretty good. We have some limestone in the area. A little higher? Okay. We have some limestone in the area, and so I think we're getting pretty decent calcium from that. I want you to look above that number, 3,000, and below that number, and notice that we need more calcium than everything else in that whole list. We've got to have the calcium in there. If you're going to have good food, sweet food, nutritious food, we've got to have the calciums in there. So we'll bring that up. Next is magnesium. It's one of the major elements again, and we need a level of 429. We have 45. This is quite low, much lower than average soils, but we can bring that up. There. Let's go to sodium next, and we're changing here to parts per million. Okay, we're at sodium to parts per million, and we want less than 35, and we have 2, which is very, very low and very, very good, because it means that we can use the ocean water or ocean water salts here, which are inexpensive to use, to very good advantage. So we can get all of those 92 different minerals that are in our blood. We can get them through the ocean water here. This is a good thing. Okay, the next is ergs, and I want you to write in there that that's energy release per gram per second. Energy release per gram per second. Okay. And we would like to be at about 200 starting for most gardens to begin with. And this is at 119, and I'm not worried about that number, because as we put on the right minerals, as we put on the right things into this garden, that number will come up. What will happen is that the calciums and the phosphate and the nitrogens, they will all react against each other and create energy in the soil, and that's what we're testing here, is the energy in the soil. Now, so that number will come way up. Matter of fact, if we have plants that are heavy feeders, like corn or tomatoes, we want that number actually to be about 500, maybe between 500 and 600. So we want that number to go way up there. Now, if we have lettuce, we might want to be around 300. So it depends on the crop that we're growing there. Now, for most backyard gardeners, it doesn't make sense to buy what's called a it's a little meter to measure that conductivity in the soil, because it's over $500 for that meter alone. If you're a farmer, then it makes every bit very good sense, because you can make a huge difference in your bottom line if you pay attention to that. I'll just stop and tell a quick story here. In Upper Peninsula in Michigan, there's a Miller family farm. These are people that are not farmers, and they had been in construction business and in care home business, but they felt convicted that God wanted them to get into the business of growing food. So they bought a farm, or they bought land. It was just raw land. They had to clear it and start planting things. They put in a greenhouse. The first greenhouse, I think, was about 30 feet wide and 110 feet long, something like that. And they planted that whole greenhouse, or they created that whole greenhouse, all of the soil in there, the Ellen White planting method. Now, we're going to demonstrate one little tree out here with that Ellen White planting method. But they put the whole greenhouse into that Ellen White planting method there. Then they planted tomatoes and some other things in that greenhouse. And every day they would test that soil to see the conductivity of that soil. Now, in our recommendations, we tell people for their backyard garden that they should add a nutrient drench once a month. In that greenhouse, and to that farmer and farmers period, we'll have them test that soil. It doesn't matter if they put a nutrient drench on yesterday. If the conductivity in that greenhouse where they're growing tomatoes drops below 500, they immediately put on another nutrient drench. Doesn't matter if they put it on yesterday there. So you want to get that back up to 500, between 500 and 600 there. Now, in a tomato farm, outside tomato farm, the average tomato plant will produce 6 pounds of tomatoes, and then it'll die. The season will be over there. In this particular greenhouse, those guys averaged 100 pounds per plant in that greenhouse. So it makes a huge difference, and it would make sense there. In your own backyard garden, if you don't have this meter, if you will watch the plant, and if you see that it looks like it's under stress or it's not growing sufficiently, you can add a nutrient drench more often than that. Okay, let's go on. The next thing is ORP on that list, and we call that oxygen reduction potential. You can write that right in. Oxygen reduction potential. There. We want a level of 28. This is 27. Now, the lower this number is below 28, the more things will tend to putrefy in the soil. The higher that number is above 28, the faster things are going to oxidize or burn out of that soil. So we don't want them to oxidize out too fast, and we don't want them to putrefy. We don't want the soil to putrefy. So again, it's balance that we're looking for here. So this is not too bad, and this will change some as we get things on. Let's go to pH. Let's go to pH next. This is an extremely important number because if the pH is below 6 or if it is above 7, you may have the minerals, the nutrients in the ground, but they will not be available to the plants. So the pH is extremely important that we keep this between 6 and 7. Now, if it hasn't rained for a long time, the pH will go up. And if we get a big rainstorm, the pH will go down. So that's going to change with our weather. However, we want to pay attention to this and keep it between 6 and 7. For most vegetables, if we're about 6.2 to 6.5, that's an ideal range here. This is a pretty good range for this soil here. Okay, copper. Now we're changing here to parts per million. We want 0.8 to 2.5. And I want you to look at copper, iron, zinc, manganese, and boron reading down there. Those are trace minerals, and we have the desired level. But when we come to these trace minerals, we want to be within that desired level, but we want to be towards the high side. Okay? So copper, we really would like to be closer to 2.5. And at 0.5, this is low, and we'll add some copper to that. Iron is next, and we want to be between 10 and 25. We really want to be close to that 25 level. And this is 45, almost 45 there. So we're quite high. We want to be careful not to add iron to this soil. This is not toxic yet, but we sure don't want to add more to it here. Let's go to zinc next. Parts per million, 1 to 6, and we want to be closer to that 6, and we're at 0.4, so we're very low, and we have to bring that up there. Manganese, now that's different. We just talked about magnesium a little earlier, but this is manganese, which is one of the trace elements. It's an extremely important one. It's the one that brings the spark of life into the seed. And if the manganese is too low in the soil, often seeds will not sprout. And if they do sprout and grow, that plant will have a hard time making seeds, which means it has a hard time fruiting there. So very, very important mineral. That's not the only thing it does in the soil, but we want to get that manganese. We really want to get that up closer to that 30 number. And this 2.6 is very, very low. And on the next page, we'll cover that again. Let's go to boron next. Again, we're at parts per million. And basically, if we're between 1 and 2 parts per million, we're just fine with boron. Again, it's a very important mineral, but at very, very small amounts. Now, what happens if I make a mistake and I get too much boron in there? See, we need it between 1 and 2 parts per million, but if I make a mistake and it gets to 4 parts per million, it's toxic. So you see why I want to know. I don't want to guess. I want to know exactly what we're doing here. Okay. Okay, that's all we tested on this one. And matter of fact, that's all you need to test for a backyard garden to begin with. There, let's turn the page. So we saw what's in the soil and what is not there, and how are we going to solve this? Okay, I'm going to give you amounts by the acre, and when we have an acre or more, of course, the recommendations are going to come that way. So what do we do to balance this soil? This is very, very important that we balance this soil out. So per acre, we want 2,000 pounds of something called soft rock phosphate. That's simply bones and shells that were buried during Noah's flood, ground up into a powder, and then that's what we're going to put onto this land. So 2,000 pounds of soft rock phosphate, a whole ton of that. We want 1,000 pounds of low magnesium limestone. We want 4,000 pounds of compost or aged manure. Now, obviously, we're going to add that locally. We're going to get that locally. You're not going to ship that in from some fertilizer company there. I want to talk about that compost. Okay, I want to talk about the compost and aged manure here. What has happened in a number of gardens in recent years and farms is that manure has become unsafe to use. And the reason for that is that our animals are being fed genetically modified foods. So we're getting serious problems from it. In one case in Camino, California, we put in an acre of tomatoes. We planted them all the Ellen White method. We tested the soil like this and added the right things. And there were some people that I knew in the area who worked on a horse ranch. And so I called them and said, hey, do you have any manure that we could use? Oh, yeah, we got lots of manure, you know. Come and get all you want. I said, well, do you feed those animals any, are you giving them any medications? And No, everything's natural. And well, do you use any Roundup or any herbicides anywhere on that ranch? No, everything's natural. Not a problem. So, for thousands of years, manures have been good fertilizers. And boy, when I was a boy, we'd go get a big trailer load of manure, put it in the garden, and we'd have good success with it. Well, the next day, the owner of the ranch, a lady, called me. The next day, the lady owning the ranch called me, and she said, Lynn, there's an organic gardener, and every year he comes and he gets a big load of this manure and has this big garden. And he hasn't come yet this year. So let him come and take what he wants, and then you can have everything that's left. She said, I'm sure there'll be more than enough for whatever you want there. So I said, okay. Well, this organic gardener didn't show up. And we got 2/3 of that acre planted. We had certified good organic compost that we were using. And then I got a call from the ranch saying, oh, the organic guy finally showed up, and there's lots of manure left for you. So I said, okay, let's get a load of that stuff. So as it came in, I said, well, put it up there where we're planting, because the lower section of the garden had all been planted, and put it up there close to where we're planting. And so everything in the last third of that acre got planted with that horse manure there. Now, we're using the same plants from the same nursery, the same fertilizers, the same water, the same soils, same weather. Everything was the same here, except the manure. I want to tell you that every single plant that got the manure failed. Every single plant. Now, they grew, but tomatoes come out and they grow a nice leaf like these, nice compound leaves. Instead, those plants put out weird-looking stems there. Now, they produced some tomatoes. There were 3 plants at the end of one row that got some of the good compost and a little bit of the horse manure. They were pineapple tomatoes, a good heirloom variety. It's a big tomato. It's 3 colors when it's ripe. It was my wife's absolute favorite tomato, delicious tomato. Those 3 tomato plants actually ripened some tomatoes there. When they ripened, I tried to eat them. I could not eat them. The flavor was so terribly bad. If that had been my first experience with pineapple tomatoes, I would have said, yuck, that's a terrible variety. Don't use that again. So not only did it damage the plant, but even when it did produce some fruit, it was just an awful flavor. You could not eat it there. So be very careful with using manures. Matter of fact, unless you know that that animal is eating only organic food, maybe if you pasture it or grow your own food for it, otherwise not. Hey, when we go to the grocery store, we're not allowed to know whether that food is genetically modified or not, and they sure don't tell the farmer that, hey, we're sending genetically modified corn and soy and alfalfa for your animals there. Incidentally, even in Europe, where GMOs are illegal for most of Europe, some places it's a crime just to own a package of seeds there. Anyway, even in most of Europe, the food that is fed to our animals is genetically modified. So be very, very careful with this manure there. Then I want to talk about the organic compost. Now, a lot of cities have composting operations where they pick up, the leaves and the grass and whatever from streets, and then they'll compost this. And we had a pastor who loved to garden, and his name was Jim Ripley. And Jim went and got a big load of this compost from the Roseville city dump there. Brought it home, put it on his garden, had a wonderful garden, a tremendous garden. So the next year he did the same thing. Went and got that big load of compost, spread it on his garden, and nothing grew. Everything was killed there. Now, what happened? The city, the municipality, as they pick up this stuff, they don't know what's in it. And so the gardeners are they're dumping stuff that has been sprayed with herbicides and other things, and so you get that herbicide reaction there into your garden and just ruin everything. So if you're going to get compost, if you can get it from a company that is making wood waste or taking wood waste maybe from a sawmill or something like that, grinding that up. We don't spray the forests with, they're not genetically modified, and we're not spraying them with Roundup there. So you're generally pretty safe with that. Sometimes from the same company, you can pick and choose. You can say, well, I want a certain type of compost, and so you can decide where it comes from. But you don't want that stuff that comes from the city dump there. Okay, let's go on. Gypsum, in this case we need 300 pounds of gypsum. And let's see, I want to look back on this. We have soft rock phosphate, we have low magnesium limestone, we have gypsum. Those are three sources right now of calcium. So you see we've got a lot of different places where calcium's coming in here. Then we've got ammonium sulfate. Remember, it's the ammonia nitrogens that is going to make the plant flower and give us fruit. The next thing is calcium nitrate, 200 pounds of calcium nitrate. And remember, we had half of the nitrate that we needed, but that's going to go back into the air. So this nitrogen cycle, the nitrogen is constantly going into the air. So we're going to add 200 pounds of calcium nitrate and 100 pounds of a product called 1152-0. Now that 1152-0, that is simply the fertilizer numbers. The 11 is nitrogen. In this case, it's calcium nitrate. And the 52 is a superphosphate, triple superphosphate there. Now, why are we putting this on when we already have put on 2,000 pounds of soft rock phosphate? All right. The soft rock phosphate is a very slow release into the ground. And the numbers on the soft rock phosphate, the fertilizer numbers, are 0, 3, 0. Well, here we have 52 there. So why would we put on such a low amount? We've got to pay for all that shipping to get that stuff here. The reason is that the soft rock phosphate is going to release very slowly into the ground. So there's 3% available this year. There's another 2 or 3% available next year, and the year after, and the year after. So we want that slow release into the ground there. The triple superphosphate here at 52, in about 30 days' time, it's going to tie up with calciums in the ground and become tricalcium phosphate. And it is unavailable to your plants now for many, many years. So we need both, because we need that boost of the triple phosphate to give the plants a good start now. Otherwise, it would take way too long to get that calcium, phosphate built up in the ground. It would take too many years there. So we use both there. Now, if you're an organic farmer, you need to be certified organic. I cannot use that triple superphosphate. It's made in a chemical fertilizer factory, and it would not qualify there. Okay, let's go to K-Mag. That's a magnesium. It's a mine product actually, but magnesium with potassium there. So we need 300 pounds of that. We need 200 pounds of Epsom salts. Remember that are Magnesium was low, very low here, so we need 200 pounds of Epsom salts, which is simply magnesium sulfate. Okay, we need 10 pounds of copper sulfate. We need 10 pounds of zinc sulfate, 40 pounds of manganese sulfate. Remember, that was very, very low, so we need a whole 40 pounds there. And then we need 10 pounds of something called 20 mule team borax. That's soap that you buy in the grocery store. Okay, it's only 11% boron, but we only need a few parts per million to reach our boron necessity here. Okay, let me go back, and if you are doing this in a backyard garden, let me give you numbers instead of 2,000 pounds per acre. Let me give you numbers per 1,000 square feet. So if you have a backyard garden per 1,000 square feet, this is what you need: 50 pounds of the soft rock phosphate. You can write it right on your sheet there. 25 pounds of low magnesium limestone. 100 pounds of compost or aged manure, and just be aware, I'd rather you not use the compost or the manure unless you know for sure that it's a good, clean product and you're not going to get a problem with it there. Okay, you need 5 pounds of gypsum. We need about 5 pounds of ammonium sulfate. You need 5 pounds of calcium nitrate. You need 2.5 pounds of the 1152-0. You need 5 pounds of K-mag. You need 5 pounds of Epsom salts. You need just a quarter pound of copper sulfate, quarter pound of zinc sulfate, and 1 pound of manganese sulfate, and a quarter pound of the boraxo soap there. Okay, a simple way to do this is there are 43,500 square feet in an acre. So just take 43 and divide, if you have this in per acre, just take that number and divide by 43, and you'll come up with a very close figure there. Okay. Now the rest of this goes into foliar feeding, where we're feeding the plant through the leaves and the stems. And so we can get nutrients right into the leaves and the stems there. If we look at a maple tree out here, or an apple tree, or tomato plant there, what we're looking at, fully 94% to even 96% of what we look at in that tomato plant didn't come out of that soil at all. It came out of the air, came out of water, it came from carbon dioxide and from other things that the plant took right out of the air. So when we feed with the foliar spray, what we're doing is we're feeding that plant directly through its leaves there. If we were to take a microscope, turn that leaf over and look at it, we would see thousands of little holes there, and they are called stomata. That means mouth in Greek, and that plant is actually eating and breathing through that stomata there. Then there are nutrient drenches, which we put out. We talked about nutrient drenches earlier, but you can make your own, or you can get some from fertilizer companies. And according to your soil test, we'll put out the right nutrient drench there. We've got too much iron. Well, we certainly don't want to put iron in our nutrient drench there. But in this case, we're going to need phosphorus and potassium, calcium, manganese, and the ocean water salts. We're going to need a lot of things that go right through to that plant, through the nutrient drench and through the leaves there. Okay. do want to talk a little bit about feeding the soil. Now, almost all agriculture today, we are feeding the plant. But to get really good, high-quality food, you need to feed the soil. That means we're feeding the life in the soil, the microbes and the mycorrhizal. Now, the mycorrhizal are the mushroom-type plants. We need both of them there. And the microbes are going to digest the soil particles. They're going to digest the organic matter and make it into a form that your little feeder roots can easily take up there. If we were to take, let's take this plant. If we were to take a magnifying glass and look at those little white roots, we would see that there are tiny, tiny little feeder roots coming off of that. They're just tiny, tiny little things there. And that's what is absorbing the nutrients from the ground. Now, the end of that little feeder root is going to exude a jelly-like substance into the ground. And that jelly-like substance it will digest particles in the soil, and so that it can take that up. Take up the minerals and the nutrients in the soil. Now, another thing that happens here is that the mushroom-type plants will come, and they will cover a much larger area. We have a root ball here that's like this, and the mushroom-type plant will maybe cover an area 10 times that big. And they look like, if we go into the forest here and kick the duff on the forest floor, often you can see what looks like cobwebs growing through the pine needles and the dead leaves and sticks and whatever there. Those are actually mushroom-type plants there. They're gathering water and nutrients from a far bigger area, and they're feeding it to those little feeder roots there. So in that case, that little amount of jelly-like substance that's being exuded out of the root is being taken by the mushroom plant, and it's feeding that mushroom plant. But that mushroom plant now, that fungi plant, is collecting from a much bigger area, and it's feeding that root back. So it's quite a difference. Now, of all the things that you can do in your garden to increase the yield and the quality of the produce, if you'll get the life in the soil going, you'll get far better results from that one thing than anything else. Several years ago, my daughter, who has a garden next door to mine, decided that she was going to do some organic, Korean organic gardening. And the Koreans have done some good things with this. And so she built a compost pile and put the right inoculants in it. And after a week or so, it looked like there was a big chunk of cheese growing in that compost pile. It was yellow, and just a great big thing. It looked like maybe cottage cheese or something. Anyway, when 6 weeks or so, I don't know how long it was, 6, 8 weeks, until that compost was done. Then she took that and she broke it up and she spread it all over the garden there. Well, I didn't think anything more of it. The next year, the next spring, that area where she had the compost pile, she decided to plant peppers there. So she had 3 rows of peppers right above where that compost was. She actually had 5 rows of peppers there, but 2 were over by the fence where there was no compost there. Now, if I had nothing else to compare it with, those 2 rows over by the fence, I would have said we had good crop of peppers. They were up 3 feet, maybe the tallest leaves were up about 4 feet on those pepper plants. And the peppers were a reasonable size there. But now you move over to those 3 rows that were on top of that compost pile. Now, mind you, there had been no added fertilizer, and the compost had been moved away, been spread elsewhere. But we move over to those 3 rows, and the plants were at least twice as tall. Some of them were as tall as me, the tops of the pepper plants. They were at least 4 times as much in breadth, and they had the most beautiful, wonderful, big crop of peppers that I have ever seen in my life. Just an incredible growth there. I thought, wow, that's interesting. So get the life into the soil. Now, then, winter comes, the snow flies, and so we cut everything down, put it in a compost pile. And the next year, we planted corn in the same area. The same thing happened again in the same area. So over by the chicken coop, over by the fence, those 2 rows, the corn was okay. But we move into these 3 rows where that compost had been, and the corn was bigger and healthier, noticeably there. Now, from my reading and from my experience, what I understand is that as we get the life in the soil built up, that for about 5 years that you can expect a little increase each year in the quality of that produce and the quantity of that produce. At about 5 years, it levels off. It doesn't go down. It kind of stays there, provided we've done the right things in the soil here. We've built this life up in the soil, and it's the life in the soil that is giving us such tremendous results there. That's God's way of keeping the forest healthy and the soil fertile for thousands of years without anybody doing anything with it there. So get the life up in the soil. It'll just make a huge, huge difference. Okay. One of the things that we use, this particular page only has this one little thing on the very top there. Some of these things got copied at the last minute, and so anyway, it says use 8 ounces of Z-Hume. Now that's a humate, but what that product is we're putting life into the soil, and we are stimulating that life. We're feeding that life in the soil there. So with this fertility program, there are actually 3 different parts of it. The first is what we went through with all the dry minerals there that was spread on the ground. Now, if you don't do anything else, you should get those minerals into the ground, because the plants can't manufacture the phosphate that's not there or the other minerals that are not there. They just can't make it there. So that's the first part, get it there. The second part are the nutrient drenches, and then the third part is the foliar feeds there. In this program, you'll see that we pay a lot of attention to getting the right life into the soil, and I'm looking for my inoculants there. I've got a plastic bag with inoculants. Okay. All right. These are inoculants. The Z-Hume we talked about, that's a liquid, and that's an inoculant that we would put into the compost pile and into the nutrient drenches. Then here's something called transplant formula. And now these products in agriculture, whether this comes from International Ag Lab, but whether you get it from International Ag Lab or some other product like this, these are the most expensive products in agriculture. They also do the most good. They're also a live product here. So in this we have rock powders, which are the right rock powders for food for these inoculants or these microbes that are in here, and for the fungi plants. They're in a spore form, a dormant form. So when it gets into the ground, when they have food, when they have water, when they have air, and normal growing temperatures, meaning this time of year. The microbes will double. Some of them will double every 2 hours. In a short time, you'll have a army of little critters working for you under your feet here. You'll have billions of those things working for you in the soil, and you want that. The fungi plants, they take a little longer to grow, probably 3 or 4 weeks, until you see the result there. So there's the transplant formula. Now, when we are planting it, whether it's a seed or whether it's a transplant, we'll take a little bit of that. We'll put it in the bottom of the hole. Let's say we're taking a tomato plant. We would want about a tablespoonful of the transplant formula. We'd put it in the bottom of that hole, mix it up a little bit, and plant the plant. If we were doing seeds, we take about a tablespoon per foot, running foot. We put it in that row, mix it up a little with the soil, and then plant the seed there. So that's an excellent product there. Also, if we're doing a compost pile, then we want to inoculate that compost pile. We want to charge that material fully charge that material with life. Here's another product. This is called Eden. And in this case, if you were to smell this, it looks and smells like kelp. Well, it is kelp. Kelp is the carrier for this. But what we're really doing here is putting the life into the soil. Again, the fungi plants, the mushroom type plants, and the microbes there. So this goes into your mix as you're planting, as we're putting the dry mix into the garden. We want to put that out. Now, most of our food today is grown on mostly dead soils there. And if we do hydroponic, well, that is, again, we're not dealing with life in the soil itself. So get the life into the soil, and you'll have far, far better results there. Okay, let me go back here. Well, let's go on with the Ellen White planting method here. This is probably the most important thing that you could learn or take away from this workshop. Anyway, it comes to us from divine wisdom. We don't know all the reasons it works, but it really works. And I want you to take a look. Oh, I don't have it up there yet. I want you to take a look at those two trees and realize that they were both the same size, planted the same day. One was planted the forestry method, the little one, and the other was planted the Ellen White method. Now, to be fair, with the forestry method, you just dig a hole and put it in the ground. And with the Ellen White method, we're digging a big hole and we're putting a lot of materials in there. And so we're giving the tree everything that it needs. And there's a huge, huge difference there. Okay, now Ellen White says that she grew peaches and nectarines and oranges and even tomatoes this way. And if you want to grow 100 pounds of tomatoes on one plant, why, you can do the same thing. You make that deep hole. You can see there we're spreading the fertilizers in that hole, and then we put that little tomato plant in there. Now, I knew one of the guys in the garden class said, well, hey, Ellen White said she planted tomatoes this way. Let's do that. I said, well, okay, let's do it. Now I knew that tomato plant was going to grow big, and so I put a big cage around it. And it was only a few weeks, and I realized that that cage was way too small. So we broke the cage down, and we stretched it out into a fence. In the process, I broke some of the branches off that tomato plant. This was an early girl tomato plant. And in spite of that, I picked just over 100 pounds off of that one plant there. So a big hole with all the right minerals according to the soil test, and then we put air down into that. Now, one of the reasons, Ellen White said to dig deeply and to dig often, and one of the reasons that a farmer digs is to get air into the soil. The microbes need it, the earthworms need it, the plant roots need it. Air is very, very important there. So we hear a lot of voices today that say don't dig or do minimal digging. Just do an experiment in your own garden. Do 2 rows exactly the same way, the same fertilizer and whatever. Do one just a minimal dig and do one double digging, and you'll quickly convince yourself that there's good reason to go the extra effort there. Okay, so what is this Ellen White method? It's deep digging with layers of topsoil, rock powders, compost, rocks go together to create healthy and abundant growth. The layer of rocks changes the electrical current in the soil and helps the roots to grow. You might consider growing anything you want, for a big crop that way. Now, what is this electrical current in the soil? The earth is round. Out of the South Pole, there's an electric current, an electric magnetic field, and it flows through the topsoil of the earth and goes around the world and goes into the North Pole there. It's fed by the sun, so this is a constant streaming thing there. And if we were to dig up any big plant out here, let's take a maple tree, if we were to dig that up and take all of the soil away from the roots there, we'd find that most of the roots are going towards magnetic north. The same thing that makes your compass needle swing to magnetic north is making those roots grow that way. So there's a big advantage to that. This layer of rock needs to separate the aerobic from the anaerobic. Now, anaerobic bacteria are those that grow without oxygen, and they need the rock powders, and they need organic material to grow and to prosper there. But they need to grow without oxygen. And so they go in the bottom of that hole. Then we have a layer of rock. And then on top of that, we have other layers that go in there. And that's where the aerobic bacteria, those that grow with oxygen, are going to go. And it's the difference between the aerobic and the anaerobic that makes that electrical current there. Out in the Kalahari Desert in Africa, there's a Swedish company, and with a grant from their government, they are making long trenches, and they're filling them the Ellen White method. Now, they're not growing anything. They're putting a wire in the bottom of that trench, and they're putting a wire in the top of that trench. Remember, we have these different layers, and the one layer of gravel that's separating the anaerobic from the aerobic there. What they're doing is they're bringing these two wires together, and now they have an electrical current there. These villages are often 100 kilometers away from the closest power lines. And yet, here's a village 100 kilometers away from any power line, and now it's got LED lights all night long. Not only that, but now they've got enough electrical energy to run their laptops and charge their cell phones. And so here's a village or villages that for thousands of years have been isolated from the rest of the world. All of a sudden, they're connected to the rest of the world. So some pretty interesting things there. Now, this is a small current. It's not a great current. I wouldn't try to run my house off of it there. But there is electrical current there, and it does considerably good job for them there. Okay, I covered that already, did I? All of a sudden, I can't get this to move. Okay. 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 Okay, the results of the Ellen White method. Healthy, large growth, abundance with high Brix, best combined with a weekly feeding. You still need to feed plants on a weekly basis, and you do need to use ocean water if and when you can there. Okay, we can go into a lot of other things here. I wonder if we should take a 5-minute break. Okay, let's take a break. And there's water and bathrooms and whatever, and we'll come back in just a few minutes then.